Relations between China and Taiwan have been tense for decades. Sometimes they catch a break, but it seems like conflicts cannot be avoided. Recently, the discussions got heated again when Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan. The Chinese government deemed it unacceptable and began military exercises around Taiwan. Many people think that these exercises might end up with an invasion. In this video, we will discuss what would happen if China decides to conquer Taiwan. We are not going to go into a detailed breakdown of military strategy, although it's worth noting that the assault on Taiwan is no easy task. Despite China having the second largest military budget in the world, the operation requires a lot of maneuvering. The Taiwanese army also has plenty of manpower and reserves, as well as access to modern weaponry. Geography and climate would be on the side of the defenders, as landing troops is possible on a small part of the island. Whether or not the US will step in is yet unknown. However, this video will focus on one of the possible scenarios. What would change if China were to successfully take over Taiwan? First, we need to discuss legal implications and how would other countries react. According to China's laws, Taiwan is a rebel state, and the island itself is considered to be a part of the People's Republic of China. That means that the occupation of Taiwan would be considered by the Chinese as restoration of the country's territorial integrity. Moreover, we need to keep in mind that only a small number of countries actually support Taiwan's independence. The list is mostly comprised of small island nations. Taiwan is not a part of the UN since 1971. Therefore, by technically trying to take back their land, China won't be breaking any international laws, and their actions won't be condemned by the UN and any other international organization. While the US and their allies do not recognize Taiwan's independence, they will probably express dissatisfaction with the state of affairs and impose sanctions on China, because they think that the island has the right for self-defense. The Taiwanese government would be completely changed and have the same regime as mainland China. Those who remain loyal to the previous government, as well as Taiwanese officials that spoke against China's communists, would likely suffer repressions. The process of assimilation would begin. Even though Chinese people live both in China and Taiwan, their separation created two diametrically opposed political nations. Chinese censorship would be enforced, elections cancelled and freedoms taken away. A substantial percentage of Chinese troops might appear on Taiwan to set up a military base. Not only that would allow China to get the island under full control, it would also give them advantage on the South China Sea. They've been trying to expand their influence there for a while now, as many trade routes go through that territory. A guerrilla movement might emerge in Taiwan, supported by America as discussed in one of our previous videos. In 73 years of independence, Taiwanese people found their own identity and will fight for their freedom. Most of the island's citizens don't identify as Chinese and are opposed to communism. As for the external policy, this would worsen the relations with America and its allies. And Southeast Asia will become another front for confrontations between the US and China. Japan and South Korea would have the strongest reactions to China attacking Taiwan. They would start growing their military, although even now Japan is shifting its focus on buffing up its defenses. A successful operation in Taiwan would significantly weaken the USA's position in the world arena. In 1955, the US and Taiwan signed a mutual defense treaty, which means that America has to protect Taiwan. Since then, China's influence and military have grown, and the US are less likely to step in. It's unclear how are they planning to intervene if the conflict reaches its boiling point. By taking over the island, China would reveal America's weakness and unwillingness to keep their promise. And the conflict itself might spark more hostilities across the entire world, same way the special operation in Ukraine did. Russia and China might get closer as a result. For now, China is neutral toward the conflict in Ukraine. They support Russia's anti-NATO rhetoric and Ukraine's territorial integrity at the same time. That way, China can keep partnerships with both Russia and the West. China is actively trading with the West, as Western countries are the most active importers of Chinese products. At the same time, China gets a lot of benefits from trading with Russia. If China attacks Taiwan, the country would be completely or partially separated from the Western market. Without any alternatives, they might turn to Russia for help. The war in Taiwan would draw significantly more attention than the conflict in Ukraine did. America would be especially outraged. Years earlier, during Trump presidency, the US declared Beijing their #1 enemy. Nowadays, China is the only country that can realistically compete with the USA. Americans find issues with China to be more pressing, and the only thing that distracted them was Russia's special operation in Ukraine. With time, this conflict will be overshadowed by China. Not for Europe, though, as hostilities in Ukraine happen right in their backyard. If America switches its focus on dealing with China and protecting Taiwan, it will weaken Ukraine in the current conflict. This would impact diplomatic channels and also shipments of various military equipment. At the moment, the US is the largest supplier for Ukraine. Many European countries either refuse to help or don't do enough. The conflict in Ukraine caused a food and energy crisis, and if China attacks Taiwan, the world would experience an even greater economical aftermath. The Taiwanese company TSMC is the largest manufacturer of semiconductors. They produce over 50% of all semiconductors in the world, and they are incredibly influential. Out of 10 leading semiconductor production companies, 4 are located in Taiwan. TSMC is the biggest of them. Semiconductors are used in all modern electronics, cars, and industrial facilities. The lack of semiconductors will lead to a heavy electronics deficit. Manufacturers will stop their production, and modern cars would be impossible to manufacture. This would cause a worldwide economic collapse, and even the most developed countries would feel its effects. But that's the worst-case scenario, as no one knows how the war in Taiwan might end. A blitzkrieg with minimal damage to infrastructure would secure China's control over the manufacturers, and China would become the new leader on the semiconductor market. This would allow the Chinese government to put more pressure on developed countries and influence world economics. It would take decades to reach the same semiconductor production capacity Taiwan has now. However, no war has ever gone smoothly. If the factories would be destroyed as the result of the hostilities, both China's and the world economy would suffer. This would lead to the biggest economic collapse since the World Wars, or even worse. Back in the day, countries weren't so codependent, and the globalization levels were lower. With the island captured, an important trade route, the Taiwan Strait, would fall under Chinese control, further increasing China's influence in global trade. In conclusion, if Taiwan gets conquered by China, the whole world would feel the consequences. It would result in economical problems for every developed country, as well as serious geopolitical changes. America would lose a portion of its credibility, and Ukraine won't be able to defend itself due to the US diverting attention to Taiwan. And Russia and China would become closer allies. This video was made possible by our sponsors on Patreon, Boosty, and YouTube. If you like our content, please consider supporting us.